Okay, so we've talked about the different types of numbers. We've got whole numbers, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are the counting numbers. Whole numbers include 0. And then we've talked about integers, which are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But they also include negative numbers. So today we're going to talk about rational numbers. But more importantly, there's two types of rational numbers. You have decimals. Decimals look like 1.2 or 0.25 or things like that. The other kind of decimals are fractions, and fractions are what we're going to talk about today. And fractions aren't really that difficult to understand. You just kind of need to wrap your mind around it, understand what the concept is and what they each mean. So for fraction, you've usually got like a number on top, a line, and then a number on the bottom. So this top number here is called the numerator, and this is on the bottom is called the denominator. But before we get to that, I want you to understand what fractions are. When we have a proper fraction, as long as the numerator is smaller than the denominator, the bottom number, all fractions is, and we've got a number line here. So what fractions are is they're all of the numbers in between the whole numbers. There's all this space in between here. And when we refer to one of these numbers that are in between all of these whole numbers, we use either decimals or we use fractions. Make sense? So let's look at a fraction here, okay? So if I have 1/2, okay? 1/2 or 1/2. So the thing you got to look here is, again, any proper fraction, the top number, the numerator, is smaller than the denominator. Every fraction where that is the case is going to be less than 1. So you're never going to have it be bigger than 1 right here. So let's pretend like this right here is 0 and this is 1, okay? So what we want to do here is, if we've got the fraction 1/2, let's look at what each part means. The denominator, what does that mean? That means that the 1, or the whole, all this distance in between here is divided into 2 equal parts. So when I say you've got the fraction of 1/2, how many equal parts is the whole divided into? You're going to say 2. And if you're going to draw a picture, what you would do is you'd come over here and you figure out, I think equal part is right about here. This is probably the equal part between these. So I would draw here and cut that. So now I have cut the whole, meaning the whole 1 part between 0 and 1. I've cut all this space into 2 equal parts, okay? So that's what the 2 means. If I have 2/3, then what that means is that how many parts is the whole divided into? And again, the whole is all this distance between the 0 and the 1, or all this distance between the 2 and the 3. So this is all the whole. We've got 1 distance from 2 to 3. So if we're going to take this distance here and represent this fraction, how many equal parts am I going to divide this distance into? Hopefully you're looking at the 3, because I'm going to divide it into 3. So I'm going to try to aim it. It's probably about here and here. So there. I've now cut this whole one spot into 3 equal parts. Okay? So that would represent this. If the fraction's 1/2, then that means that the one whole, is divided into 2 equal halves. Well, let's look at a different one. 10 over 25, okay? So if my fraction is 10 over 25, and let's pretend like this whole, so how many equal parts am I going to divide this whole into if this is my fraction? That's right, 25. Now, that would be really hard for me to cut these in, so I'm not going to draw a picture of that. But just know that if this is my fraction, this entire whole, this one whole, is divided in 25 times, okay? So let's go back to this fraction. We know that the whole is divided into two equal parts, so I'm going to divide that. Now, what does the numerator mean, the top number? What does that mean? Well, here it says that the whole's been divided into 2 parts. So I'm looking at 2 parts here. What the numerator tells me is how many of these parts I actually have. So if it says shade in 1/2, well, the half, or the 2, says I've got 2 parts, and the 1 is how many parts I'm going to shade in. Let's change the color a little bit here. So we're going to shade in 1 of the 2 parts. I'm shading in 1 of the 2 parts. I'm looking at 2 parts, but I only have 1 of them, okay? So let's look at this one here now for the 2/3 fraction, okay? So I'm going to use this 1 whole part. How many parts am I going to divide this into? If this is my fraction, how many parts am I going to divide, equal parts am I going to divide this whole into? 3. That's right. So let's try to do that as good as possible. 3. So I've got this, and we're pretending like these are 3 equal parts, okay? And if it tells me to shade 2/3 of it, how many of these equal parts am I going to shade in? Well, that's what my denominator, or my numerator, tells me, the top number. So I'm going to shade in 2 of them. Okay? But if this is my fraction, how many equal parts is my whole divided into? 25. And how many of those equal parts would I shade in? 10. Yep. So we've looked at it on a number line. And again, a fraction, fractions, when the numerator is smaller than the denominator, is always going to be less than 1. Always less than 1. So if you have, which number's bigger, 1 or 3/4? 1 is bigger, because a fraction where the numerator is smaller than the denominator is never bigger than 1. It's all the fractions you could ever write are all in between one whole number. Okay?